stand next to Eric and make him look short. Is
that everyone? Is that everyone?
Oh, here we go. Okay.
All right, so good afternoon. We want to thank all of our partners up here. We have a lot of representatives up here because we have a great announcement on some wonderful police work that was done in our community over a period of time. So this is a 2-year operation, dismantle the drug trafficking organization here in Central Florida that had been operating for nearly 6 years. And so this was a collaborative effort between the Metropolitan Bureau of Investigation and all the governing board. Most of them are up here, the DA, the U.S. Postal Inspector Service, law enforcement in Puerto Rico as well. So through this operation, we were able to seize drugs valued at over $8 million during the course of the investigation. And this is another great example of how law enforcement in Central Florida here works together to keep our community safe. So today we have representatives from the Metropolitan Bureau of Investigation, U.S. Postal Inspector Service, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Puerto Rico, along with the Florida Attorney General Office of Statewide Prosecution. And so we're very, very proud of the work everyone's involved. In a minute, I'm going to turn it over to Director Ron Stucker to talk about the details of the investigation. But there is no doubt in our minds that the arrests of these individuals and the significant seizure of this drugs has saved lives already in our community and will continue to save lives. And so we also know there are criminals who will see this as an opportunity to rise up and take the place of this organization. And we're here to let them know that we will dismantle their drug trafficking organization and stop them in their tracks. So this time I'm going to turn it over to Director Stucker to discuss the details of the investigation.
Thank you, Sheriff. I appreciate that. We appreciate you all being here today. We appreciate our partners here. In addition to our MBI governing board members here, we have representatives from the U.S. Attorney's Office in Puerto Rico, Mr. Luis Rivera, and also the Assistant Inspector in Charge of the U.S. Postal Inspection Service out of Miami, Dave Arias, in addition to HIDTA Director AJ Collazo. So we appreciate them being here today. We want to take this opportunity to share with you some of the details on one of the largest cocaine trafficking operations that we've seen in Central Florida in about 3 decades. The members of this organization are accused of trafficking hundreds of kilos of cocaine into and through Central Florida. MBI and its partner agencies, the Drug Enforcement Administration and the U.S. Postal Inspection Service, seized over 339 kilos of cocaine during this investigation, and there's a total of 35 defendants. One seizure alone was over 220 kilos of cocaine. Carlos Velez, one of our defendants, lives in Orlando, is based out of Orlando, and he was directing this shipment of cocaine from the Dominican Republic through Puerto Rico, we believe, bound for Central Florida. To put this a little bit in perspective for you, in 2022, MBI seized the 3rd largest amount of cocaine that it has seized in its 44-year history. The only years that we seized more cocaine was 1991 and 1992, which was part of the crack cocaine epidemic. The amount of cocaine coming into Central Florida over the last couple of years has actually driven down the price of bulk cocaine by approximately 1/3. The defendants in this case used the U.S. Postal Service and private parcel carriers to ship their cocaine to Central Florida. Once it's in Central Florida, they would distribute it throughout our region, throughout the state of Florida, and up the eastern seaboard of the United States, as far as Maine, Connecticut, and New Jersey. The investigation showed that certain defendants were also in possession of firearms and had the ability to convert these firearms to fully automatic weapons. Drug trafficking organizations have the capacity to be extremely violent, and that's one reason we prioritize the investigation and prosecution of drug traffickers, is because they can be so violent, and we want to prevent violence and to solve violent crimes. On 2 occasions during this investigation, MBI agents had to take immediate action to stop imminent violence. When drug traffickers were having a dispute with each other over drugs or money, and we believed there were going to be shootings or there was going to be imminent violence, agents took action that stopped that violence. On a third occasion, though, we have evidence that a drug trafficker who lost a significant shipment of cocaine was tortured with a hot iron and was burned with that because his fellow traffickers believed that he had stolen the drugs. During this investigation, we seized 25 guns, 2 of which were stolen firearms. 5 of the defendants, Yamil Vargas, Carlos Velez, Francisco Barbeau, Samuel Barbeau, and Kevin Chavez Nieves, are also being charged federally with illegally shipping firearms from Orlando to Puerto Rico, and they are being prosecuted by the United States Attorney's Office in Puerto Rico. In addition to the racketeering and cocaine trafficking charges, 4 defendants, Francisco Barbeau, Yadiel Velasquez, Michael Gonzalez, and Guillermo Segura Aponte, are charged with trafficking in or conspiracy to traffic in fentanyl. We're also waiting on lab results to come back, but we believe once we receive those results, more individuals will be charged with trafficking in fentanyl. As we know, fentanyl is a highly addictive opioid. It's 80 to 100 times more powerful than morphine, and fentanyl is mixed with other drugs to make them more addictive. An overwhelming number of deaths in the Ninth Judicial Circuit are caused by fentanyl, or the decedents have fentanyl in their system at the time of their death. In this investigation, agents received information that one of the defendants was mixing horse tranquilizer with drugs to increase the volume of the drugs, and also a defendant was referring to fentanyl as quote unquote death. Agents know that drug traffickers market their fentanyl based on the number of overdoses and the number of deaths that the drugs cause, and that they will use people who are addicted to opioids, fentanyl, heroin, as their testers. They will give them a sample of the drug to see what kind of reaction they have, and then they make contingency plans if their testers die of a fentanyl overdose. This was a joint investigation between MBI, the DEA, and the United States Postal Inspection Service. The defendants in this case are being prosecuted by the Florida Attorney General Ashley Moody's Office of Statewide Prosecution and by the United States Attorney's Office in Puerto Rico. Their charges include racketeering, conspiracy to commit racketeering, trafficking in fentanyl, and trafficking in cocaine and conspiracy. If convicted on the state charges, those who trafficked in 150 kilos or more of cocaine potentially face a life sentence. For those that are charged with first-degree felonies, such as racketeering, if convicted, they face up to 30 years in prison. We know there's a lot of defendants, a lot of charges. We provided you all a face sheet over here with all of the defendants that list out their individual charges. The Drug Enforcement Administration had a conflict today and could not be here today, but they provided a written statement that we've also provided to you in writing, if you would like to look at that. This time, I'd like to turn it over to Orlando Police Chief Eric Smith for some comments, and then after that, we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Chief.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I want to thank all of you for being here today. I want to take the opportunity to recognize the men and women involved in this investigation. As you will hear today, the arrest, drugs, and firearms seized is very impressive. MBI, DEA, U.S. Postal inspectors, and authorities in Puerto Rico worked together on this case. Thank you all for your hard work. I also want to recognize the U.S. Attorney's offices in Florida and Puerto Rico and the Office of Statewide Prosecution for their contribution to this case. It is my goal to make sure the Orlando Police Department is working close with every agency to reduce violent crime in our community. Criminals don't respect jurisdictional lines, and this case clearly demonstrates how we all work together to put them in prison. During my career, I had the opportunity to be assigned to MBI as a commander. I know firsthand how well they develop multi-level cases. This is one of the largest cases we have seen in years. Fentanyl is a highly addictive drug that is often mixed with other drugs to make them addictive. The overdose deaths in our area often involve fentanyl. This is the case directly impacted the amount of fentanyl coming to our community, and extremely important to me that we reduce fentanyl that's coming in. Stopping this organization will save lives in Central Florida. Once again, great job by everybody involved, and thank you to everyone who supported this investigation.
So this time, we're happy to answer any questions.
This is either for the sheriff or for Ron. Looking at this chart, like you say, there's a lot of defendants. Is it fair to say, given the size of the photographs, that the 3 people across the top are considered to be really the kingpins or the ringleaders of this operation?
Yes, that would be correct. 3 people at the top: Xavier Ramos, Carlos Velez, and Michael Gonzalez we believe, were the heads of the organization. As I mentioned earlier, Velez was the one who was coordinating the 220 kilo deal coming through the Dominican and Puerto Rico. Ramos is actually based out of New Jersey and is a source of supply. Michael Gonzalez was involved in the fentanyl trafficking here in Central Florida.
Is there any way to quantify, Ron, I know there's an overall drug trade. Were these guys making up a substantial portion of everything that you think your investigations were seeing around the area?
It kind of waits to be seen, as we're going to see in the future how much drugs are coming in here. Unfortunately, we are aware of other organizations that are shipping large amounts of cocaine and fentanyl into this area. The percentage that this group was accountable for is difficult to tell at this time. We just have to see how things go into the future.
But it's safe to say it's significant.
They were very significant. We estimate that they were shipping at least 60 kilos of cocaine per week into Central Florida, and we believe they've been operating for up to 6 years.
How did you find out that they were shipping some of the drugs via the USPS and other private mailers? That's interesting. How did that come about?
You know, we don't talk about our specific investigative techniques. Obviously, we use a variety of ways that we conduct a criminal investigation, and we get tips and we get leads on cases that we have. You know, as we've often said before, drug traffickers are really no different than legitimate businessmen. They have to set up the same logistics. I mean, some use trucks, some use planes, some use boats, some use a parcel service because they have to move their product from one location to another. And so once we receive information on that, then we begin to investigate and exploit that with our investigators and analysts to see how big that operation is.
I know you mentioned that one of the defendants is in Orlando, but how big, can you talk about how widespread in Central Florida they were operating across counties, if you can name any of the counties or cities that they may have been a part of?
Sure. They were operating, most of our folks lived and were based in Orange and Osceola County. We did have traffickers that were in Seminole County and Altamont Springs. They were as far as Volusia County, in which they lived and were receiving drugs. We believe there were several hundred addresses over the course of the years that actually received packages at different times. And that does not mean everyone who lived at that address knew what was going on or was aware of what was happening, but their operation was very extensive. And then I believe it is 5 of the defendants who are based solely in Puerto Rico. They live in Puerto Rico, and the rest are in the Central Florida area.
They putting these all like one particular stash house or either with stash houses where they would have big shipments, pick them up and bring them up these coasts, or how do they all work?
As I said, they received shipments of cocaine to probably just shy of 300 for different addresses. You know, at that point, then they would either repackage that or cut those drugs for distribution here in Central Florida, or they would then send it, break it down still in bulk sizes to send it to different parts of Florida up the eastern seaboard. So there was multiple locations over the course of years that they used to do different parts of that operation.
Can you talk about why it's so easy for people to get drugs into Puerto Rico and then here in the United States? And do you think the federal government needs to do more to prevent drugs from going into Puerto Rico?
You know, I'm a local law enforcement officer. We do what we do here to do this. I can tell you our federal partners, you know, in this case with DEA and the US Postal Service, not only in this case, but multiple cases work extremely well with us here in Central Florida. We have a great working relationship with DEA, postal inspectors, HSI, the U.S. Attorney's Office to try to leverage who has the best resources for that. We do know drugs through a variety of means, whether they're ships or containers or parcels, come from Puerto Rico. That is a source. And so we work very closely with our federal partners since they have that jurisdiction and our partners in Puerto Rico to try to stop the drugs before they come or to make cases against those defendants.
I just didn't know if a lot of the sources of supply was from nearby countries that you down in that area and then also the border.
In general, it's known that the drugs come from South America through the Dominican Republic into Puerto Rico and then to the continental United States.
You mentioned crack cocaine in the late 80s, early 90s. It seemed like we were covering that particular issue constantly. We haven't heard a lot about cocaine. We hear a lot about heroin, a lot about fentanyl. Is this an indication that cocaine's making a comeback, or really has our attention just been drawn elsewhere and the cocaine has been, persistent?
We don't have crack cocaine like we had back in the 80s and 90s. We now have more powdered cocaine. We have observed over the last few years that although we have focused on the overdose being caused by fentanyl and heroin, the actual deaths being caused by cocaine have not dropped. They still remain steady. So there's been a steady supply of cocaine coming to Central Florida. MBI has observed really over the last 4 years significant increases the amount of cocaine that we are able to seize, which we believe indicates the amount that's coming into Central Florida. So really starting probably about 2019, we began to see an uptick in bulk cocaine shipments coming to Central Florida.
You mentioned that some of it was mixed with horse tranquilizer to increase the volume of the drugs. Is that a trend you're now seeing?
They always mix it with something. They obviously are not going to sell bulk cocaine to individuals, and so they're going to cut that with something. Horse tranquilizer is not unique to this group. They mix it with all kind of different things. One of the things we're seeing now, of course, is they're mixing almost all drugs are mixed with fentanyl, because fentanyl becomes more addictive, and of course it is so potent. That is why it's driving so many overdose deaths. Some people don't think they're buying fentanyl. They may think they're buying cocaine. We have times laboratories have told us they have found fentanyl in marijuana. People think they're smoking marijuana and there's fentanyl in there, and then the person dies because it takes such a little bit to kill somebody.